The signal came from nowhere. It was weak, broken, and very old. Admiral Park Ji-soo sat in her command chair on the bridge of the starship Horizon and watched her crew work to trace it. The signal was a distress call, but it was not human. It came from an alien ship drifting at the edge of Terran space. "Admiral, we have located the source," said Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun. He was young, but his eyes were sharp. "It is a cargo vessel. Velthari design. No life signs detected, but the ship still has power." Park Ji-soo felt something cold move through her chest. The Velthari Consortium was known across the galaxy as traders. They bought and sold everything. Some said they sold things that should never be sold, but no one had proof. No one wanted to look too closely at a faction so powerful. "Prepare a boarding team," she said. "I want to know what they were carrying." Kim Do-hyun led 12 soldiers onto the alien ship. The corridors were dark and smelled of old metal. And something else. Something wrong. The team moved slowly, their lights cutting through the shadows. They found no crew. No bodies. The ship had been abandoned in a hurry. Then they reached the cargo hold. Kim Do-hyun stopped at the entrance. His light fell on rows of metal pods stretching into the darkness. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Each pod had a small window, and behind each window was a face. Children. Human children. "Admiral," his voice shook as he spoke into his communicator. "You need to see this." Park Ji-soo arrived within the hour. She walked through the cargo hold in silence. Medical Officer Lee Yuna followed close behind, scanning the pods with trembling hands. The children inside were asleep, locked in stasis. Their ages ranged from 4 to 14. Some had scars. Some had strange marks on their skin that looked like brands. All of them were thin, pale, and alone. "These children were taken from our frontier colonies," Lee Yuna said softly. "The DNA matches missing persons reports from the last 10 years. Admiral, there are over 800 children in this hold." Park Ji-soo stopped in front of one pod. Inside was a small girl with black hair. She looked peaceful in her frozen sleep. But even in stasis, her face carried a sadness that no child should know. "Wake them," the Admiral ordered. "Carefully, one at a time." The process took days. Each child required slow, gentle revival. Many woke up screaming. Some did not speak at all. They had been stolen from their families, from their homes, from everything they knew. They had been loaded onto ships like cargo and sent across the stars to be sold. Lee Yuna worked without rest. She examined each child and recorded what had been done to them. The findings made her sick. The children had been genetically modified to be stronger, faster, more obedient. Their minds had been tampered with through drugs and conditioning. They had been turned into products. Where were they taking them? Park Ji-soo asked. "The navigation data shows a destination in Velthari space," Kim Do-hyun replied. "A place called Processing Station 7. From there, they would be sold to wealthy buyers across the galaxy." Park Ji-soo closed her eyes. She thought about her own daughter, safe at home on Earth. She thought about the parents of these children, who had spent years wondering what happened to their sons and daughters. She thought about the monsters who did this and called it business. One of the rescued children approached her. It was the small girl with black hair. She had woken 2 days ago but had not spoken a single word until now. She reached up and took the Admiral's hand. "Are you here to take us back to the farms?" she asked. Park Ji-soo knelt down so she could look into the child's eyes. "What farms, little one?" "The growing farms, where they make us ready for the masters. They said we would be sold to good masters if we behaved. They said no one was looking for us. They said our families did not want us anymore." Park Ji-soo felt her heart break into 1,000 pieces. She pulled the child close and held her tight. "They lied to you," she whispered. "Your families never stopped looking. And I promise you, We are going to find every single child they took. We are going to bring them all home. The report reached Earth 3 days later. It was marked with the highest priority and sent directly to every government, every military command, every news network on the planet. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Anger. Pure, unified anger. For centuries, humans had fought each other. Nations against nations. Ideologies against ideologies. They had done terrible things to their own kind. But this was different. This was their children, taken by aliens who saw humanity as nothing more than livestock. Every old conflict was forgotten. Every political divide closed. Religious leaders who had argued for generations stood together and called for action. Military commanders who had been rivals shook hands and began planning as one force. The United Earth Council held an emergency session. Leaders from every nation attended. Secretary General Choi Min-ji stood before them, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "We have discovered proof of crimes against our people," she said. "Our children have been stolen and sold like animals. The Velthari Consortium is responsible. We cannot allow this to stand. We must not allow this to stand." The vote was unanimous. Earth would demand justice. Back on the horizon, Admiral Park Ji-soo watched the stars through her window. The rescued children were being cared for in the medical bay. Psychologists were already working to help them heal. Messages had been sent to their families. Soon, there would be reunions, filled with tears and joy. But there were still more children out there. Thousands more. Maybe millions. Scattered across Velthari space, waiting in dark places for masters who would never see them as human. Kim Do-hyun entered her quarters. "Admiral, Earth Command has sent new orders. We are to return home immediately. A full war council is being assembled." Park Ji-soo nodded slowly. "The Velthari think they know what war is. They have conquered weak species. They have crushed those who could not fight back. But they have never faced humans." She turned to look at her lieutenant, and he saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. Not just anger. Not just determination. Something older and deeper. The protective fury of a species that had clawed its way up from nothing, that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars, that had always protected its young. "They took our children," Admiral Park Ji-soo said quietly. "They are about to learn why that was the worst mistake in galactic history." The Great Hall of the United Earth Council was silent. Every seat was filled. Leaders from every nation on Earth sat together, watching Secretary General Choi Min-ji walk to the center platform. Above her, giant screens showed images of the rescued children. Their hollow eyes stared down at the assembly. 30 days, Choi Min-ji said. Her voice echoed through the hall. "We will give the Velthari Consortium 30 standard days to return every human child in their possession. Every single one. If they refuse, if they ignore us, if they laugh at us, then we will come for our children ourselves, and we will not be gentle." The message was sent across the stars to the Velthari homeworld. It took 6 hours for the reply to arrive. Ambassador Thesser Prime appeared on every screen on Earth. He was tall and pale, with 4 arms and eyes like black stones. His voice was smooth and cold as ice. "Little humans," he said, and the word sounded like an insult. "You have been part of the galactic community for barely 2 centuries. You know nothing of how things work among the stars. The consortium has existed for 12,000 years. We have crushed species older and stronger than you. Your ultimatum is rejected. Your threats are meaningless. Return to your small world and be thankful we do not add your entire species to our inventory." The transmission ended. The screens went dark. For a long moment, no one in the council chamber spoke. Then, slowly, Choi Min-ji smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had hoped for peace, but was not afraid of war. "So be it," she said. The next morning, Earth began to transform. Fleet Commander Baek Sun-ho had spent 30 years in the military. He had fought pirates, defended colonies, and trained thousands of soldiers. He thought he knew what human determination looked like. He was wrong. Volunteers arrived at military bases faster than they could be processed. Young people, fresh from school, stood in line beside veterans with gray hair. Factory workers showed up with their tools, ready to build whatever was needed. Scientists left their universities and reported to weapons research centers. Doctors packed their bags and joined medical corps. "Sir, we have more volunteers than we can handle," his aide reported. "People are flying in from every continent. We do not have enough uniforms." Baek Sun-ho looked out his window at the endless lines of people waiting to serve. "Then make more uniforms. Train everyone who can fight. Assign the rest to support roles. We are going to need every hand." Factories that had made cars and phones and toys shut down their production lines and began building weapons. Ships, armor, medical supplies. The entire industrial strength of Earth turned toward a single purpose. In the shipyards orbiting Luna, engineers worked 20-hour shifts. New warships took shape at impossible speed. Designs that would normally take years were completed in weeks. Workers slept on the floors beside their stations and woke up to keep building. On the other side of the planet, an old man named Han Dongwoo walked into a recruitment center. He was 73 years old. His hair was white, and his hands shook slightly. The young officer at the desk looked at him with surprise. "Sir, with respect, are you sure you want to enlist? We have age limits for combat roles." Han Dongwoo placed his identification on the desk. The officer's eyes went wide. This old man had medals from Earth's last great war 60 years ago. He had been a hero when he was young. "I am not here to fight on the front lines," Han Dongwoo said calmly. "I am here to train your soldiers. I am here to teach them what I know about war. And I am here because they took children." The officer stood and saluted. "Welcome back, sir." Stories like this happened everywhere. Parents who had lost children in the raids volunteered for the most dangerous missions. Elderly teachers offered to care for orphaned refugee children so younger adults could fight. Communities pooled their savings to fund additional ships. Religious groups that had argued for centuries prayed together for victory. The Velthari watched from across the stars and did not understand what they were seeing. Ambassador Thessar Prime reported to the High Council of the Consortium. "The humans are mobilizing, but it is meaningless. Their fleet is small. Their technology is primitive. They have never fought a war on this scale." One of the council members, an ancient Velthari named Vorin, raised a concern. "We have heard reports that the humans united very quickly. All their nations, all their factions. Is this not unusual?" Thessar Prime waved his forearms dismissively. "They are emotional creatures. They are angry now. But anger fades. In a few months, they will return to fighting among themselves. This is what primitive species do. And if they do not, then we will teach them the same lesson we taught the Kelith and the Morvathi and all the others who challenged us. We will break them, and we will add the survivors to our inventory. Human slaves will fetch good prices. They are clever and adaptable." The High Council laughed. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had never lost a war. They could not imagine losing one now. But Vorin did not laugh. He had lived long enough to see many strange things. He had seen species that should have surrendered fight until the last individual was dead. He had seen empires that seemed eternal crumble overnight. And he had learned one truth, that the younger Velthari had forgotten. The most dangerous enemy was not the strongest. It was the one with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Back on Earth, Admiral Park Jisoo met with the War Council. Maps of Velthari space covered the walls. Intelligence reports filled the tables. Hundreds of officers worked to plan what would be the largest military operation in human history. "We cannot win a straight fight," one general said. Their ships are faster. Their weapons are stronger. Their numbers are greater. Then we will not fight straight, Park Jisoo replied. We will fight like humans have always fought. We will be clever. We will be adaptable. We will strike where they do not expect and vanish before they can respond. And what is our goal? To defeat the consortium entirely? Park Jisoo shook her head. Our goal is simple. We are going to rescue our children. Every last one of them. The consortium can surrender them peacefully, or they can try to stop us. Either way, we are bringing our children home. The deadline approached. 29 days passed. The Velthari did not respond. They believed the humans were bluffing. They believed that when the deadline came, Earth would back down, embarrassed and defeated. On the 30th day, Secretary General Choi Min-ji stood before the cameras one last time. The 30 days have ended. The Velthari Consortium has made their choice. Now we will make ours. She paused and looked directly into the camera, speaking not to the consortium, but to her own people, to every human watching this. Wherever you are, know that we go to war not for conquest, not for revenge, but for our children. We will bring them home. Whatever it costs, we will bring them home. She stepped away from the podium. The screens went dark. Across the galaxy, the Velthari celebrated. They had called humanity's bluff. The foolish little species would lick their wounds and learn their place. And then, at exactly midnight Galactic Standard Time, the stars began to burn. While Earth prepared for war, Intelligence Officer Shin Hana traveled to the darkest corners of the galaxy. She went alone, in a small ship with no weapons and no markings. Her mission was simple, but dangerous. She was looking for friends. The Velthari Consortium had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. In that time, they had crushed many species. Some were destroyed completely. Others were enslaved. A few survived in the shadows, broken and afraid, but still alive. Still remembering what freedom felt like. Shin Hana's first stop was a hidden colony on a frozen moon, far from any trade routes. The people there called themselves the Morvathi. They were tall and thin, with bodies like insects and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. Once, they had been a proud civilization, with beautiful cities and advanced science. Now, fewer than 1 million of them remained. The Morvathi guards met her ship with weapons raised. They had learned to fear strangers. I come from Earth, Shin Hana said, raising her empty hands. I come to talk about the Velthari. The guards took her to their leader, an ancient Morvathi named Chirves. He was so old that his shell had turned white, and his movements were slow and careful, but his mind was still sharp, and his eyes still burned with old pain. Why does a human come to us? He asked. Your species is new to the stars. You know nothing of our history, our suffering. Shin Hana sat down across from him. We know enough. We know the Velthari took our children and sold them like animals. We know they have done the same to your people for much longer. Chirves was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy, with memory. 300 years ago, the Velthari came to our homeworld. They said they wanted to trade. We welcomed them. We were foolish. He paused, his old body trembling slightly. They took an entire generation of our children. Not to sell, but to use in their processing centers. To experiment on. To break. My own daughter was among them. I never saw her again. I am sorry, Shin Hana said softly. Many species are sorry. Many species have said kind words. But no one has ever done anything. The Velthari are too powerful. Everyone is afraid. Earth is not afraid. Shin Hana leaned forward. We are going to war. We are going to attack the consortium and rescue our children. But we know we cannot win alone. We need help. We need information. Chirves studied her with his mirror-bright eyes. What kind of information? Locations. We need to know where they keep the slaves. Every processing center, every holding facility, every auction house. Your people have been watching them for centuries. You know their secrets. The old Morvathi was quiet again. Around him, other Morvathi had gathered, listening to the conversation. They looked at each other, with expressions that Shinhana could not read. If we give you this information, Chirves said slowly, the Velthari will know we helped you. They will come for us. They will finish what they started 300 years ago. That is a risk, Shinhana admitted. But consider this. Right now, you are already dying. Your population shrinks every year. Your colonies get smaller and poorer. In another century, maybe two, the Morvathi will be gone. Not because the Velthari attack you, but because you have lost hope. She stood up and looked around at the gathered crowd. Come with us. Fight with us. If we win, you will be free for the first time in 300 years. If we lose, at least you will have died fighting instead of hiding. Chirves closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were tears on his ancient face. You promise to free everyone? Not just human children? Everyone, Shinhana said. Every child, every slave, every prisoner. We will open every cage the Velthari have built. The old Morvathi rose slowly to his feet. Despite his age, despite his frailty, there was something powerful in the way he stood. Then you will have our information. And more than that, you will have our warriors. We are few, and we are weak, but we still remember how to fight. Over the following weeks, Shinhana traveled to other hidden places. She found the Keleth, a species of proud warriors who had been reduced to servants after losing a war centuries ago. They had been forced to fight in Velthari arenas for entertainment, killing each other while their masters watched and cheered. When Shinhana offered them a chance to fight for something real, they accepted immediately. She found the Vasari, a species of small, clever beings who had been used as engineers and technicians because their hands were perfect for delicate work. They had no weapons and no fighting skills, but they knew every weak point in Velthari ship designs. She found survivors from a dozen other species, each with their own story of loss and suffering. Some had only a handful of individuals left. Others had thousands. All of them had been forgotten by the galaxy. All of them had waited in darkness for something to change. On a small space station in neutral territory, Shinhana gathered representatives from all these species. They sat together in a cramped meeting room, looking at each other with a mixture of hope and fear. Thank you for coming, Shinhana said. I know this is dangerous. I know you have every reason to stay hidden and safe. But I also know that safety is an illusion. The Velthari will never stop taking. They will never stop hurting, unless someone stops them. A Keleth warrior named Thrak spoke up. His voice was deep and rough from years of fighting in the arenas. The humans are young. You have never faced an enemy like the Consortium. How do we know you will not fail like everyone else? Shinhana smiled slightly. You do not know. None of us know what will happen. But I can tell you this about humans. We are stubborn. We do not give up. And when someone hurts our children, we become very, very dangerous. She activated a screen showing a map of Velthari space. Red dots marked every known slave facility. We are going to hit them everywhere at once. Not one attack, but dozens. They will not be able to respond to all of them. While they are confused, we will rescue as many prisoners as possible and retreat before they can organize. And then, Chirves asked, then we hit them again and again, until they have nothing left to fight with, or until they surrender our people. The room was silent. Then, slowly, Thrak stood up. He placed his fist over his heart in the old Keleth salute of respect. The arenas taught me to fight for the amusement of others. Now I will fight for something that matters. My warriors are yours. Human. One by one, the other representatives stood. The Morvathi, the Vasari, the others. Each pledged what they had to give. Soldiers, ships, information, skills, hope. Shin Hana felt tears in her eyes, but kept her voice steady. Earth does not ask you to fight for us. We ask you to fight beside us. For every child of every species they have taken, for every life they have destroyed, for every future they have stolen. She raised her hand in a human gesture of promise. Together, we will make them pay. Together, we will be free. In the shadows of the galaxy, the forgotten and the broken began to believe again. The light of hope, so long extinguished, flickered back to life. And in the great halls of the Velthari Consortium, where the masters of the galaxy sat in comfort and power, no one noticed the storm that was coming. They would notice soon enough. On the Velthari homeworld, the High Council was celebrating. 30 days had passed since the human ultimatum, and nothing had happened. Ambassador Thessar Prime had been right. The humans were cowards who made empty threats. The celebrations would continue for 3 days, with feasts and entertainment, and slaves serving their masters. Then the sky exploded. Admiral Park Jisu led the assault on Velthar Prime's orbital shipyards. Her fleet dropped out of hyperspace so close to the planet that the defense systems had no time to respond. 12 human warships, supported by 30 allied vessels, opened fire in perfect coordination. Target the construction platforms first, Park Jisu ordered. Destroy their ability to build new ships. Weapons fire lit up the darkness. Velthari shipyards that had operated for centuries burned and broke apart. Thousands of tons of metal twisted and melted. Ships that had been under construction cracked open and spilled their contents into the void. The Velthari defense fleet scrambled to respond, but they were confused and unprepared. They had expected no attack at all, certainly not one so bold and so close to their homeworld. At the same moment, Commander Oh Junho was leading a strike team against the consortium's main communication relay. This station connected Velthari space, allowing messages to travel instantly across thousands of light years. Without it, the consortium would be blind and deaf. We have 30 seconds before their shields come up. Oh, Junho said calmly. Make them count. His pilots were the best Earth had produced. They had trained for this mission for months, practicing until they could fly the attack pattern in their sleep. Now, they executed it perfectly. Missiles struck weak points that Vasari engineers had identified. Energy beams cut through armor that was supposed to be unbreakable. The relay station died in a massive explosion. Across Velthari space, communications went dark. But the most important attack was happening far from the homeworld, at a facility called Breeding Center 4. Captain Quan Unji stood at the helm of her ship, the Morning Star, as it approached the center. This place was where the Velthari grew their slaves. Children from many species were raised here, conditioned from birth to serve. Over 10,000 of them were inside right now, waiting to be sold. All teams ready? Quan Unji asked. Ready, Captain, came the response from a dozen transport ships hiding behind the Morning Star. Then let us bring them home. The attack was fast and brutal. The Morning Star destroyed the center's defense platforms while transport ships landed on the facility's outer sections. Soldiers poured out, fighting through corridors designed to keep people in, not keep attackers out. On the ground, Sergeant No Jinhyuk led his squad through the breeding center's main complex. They had studied maps provided by Morvathi intelligence, but nothing had prepared them for what they found. The children were kept in cells, organized by species and age. Each cell had a number, but no name. The children wore simple gray clothes, with codes printed on their backs. They had been raised to believe they were property. They had never known anything else. Do not be afraid, No Jinhyuk said through his helmet's translator as he broke open the first cell. We are here to rescue you. You are going home. The children stared at him with wide eyes. Some backed away in fear. Others could not understand what rescue meant. They had never heard the word before. A young Morvathi child, barely old enough to walk, was too weak to stand. Her wings, which should have been bright and colorful, were dull and torn. She had been marked as defective, scheduled to be disposed of. She looked up at the human soldier towering over her. Through the translator, she whispered, "The masters said no one would come for us." No Jin-hyuk knelt down and gently lifted her in his arms. His voice was thick when he spoke. They were wrong. Throughout the facility, soldiers found horrors that would haunt them forever. They found processing rooms where children were modified to be stronger or smarter or more obedient. They found punishment chambers where the disobedient were broken. They found records showing that millions of children had passed through this facility over the centuries. Sold to owners across the galaxy, hardened warriors wept as they carried children to the waiting transports. There was no time to process what they were seeing. No time to fall apart. They could grieve later. Right now, they had to save as many as possible. "Sergeant, we have a problem," one of his soldiers reported. "The Velthari are sending reinforcements. A battle group is on its way. We have maybe 20 minutes. No Jin-hyuk looked at the hundreds of children still waiting to be evacuated. 20 minutes was not enough time. Not nearly enough. "Then we work faster. Everyone move. Get these children on the transports now." The evacuation became a desperate race. Soldiers carried children in their arms, 2 or 3 at a time. Medics rushed between groups, stabilizing those too weak to move. Transport pilots pushed their engines beyond safety limits to make more trips. Captain Kwan Unji watched from orbit, tracking the approaching Velthari fleet. Her weapons officer looked at her nervously. "Captain, we should retreat. We cannot win against a full battle group. Not yet." Her eyes never left the screen, showing the evacuation progress. Not until everyone is aboard. With 5 minutes to spare, the last transport lifted off from Breeding Center 4. The facility was empty. Every single child, all 10,000 of them, was now safely on human ships. "All ships, jump to hyperspace," Kwan Unji ordered. "Get us out of here." The fleet vanished just as Velthari weapons fire reached their position. Behind them, the breeding center stood empty and useless. The masters had come to find their property gone. Across Velthari space, similar scenes played out at 17 different facilities. Not all attacks succeeded as well as the one at Breeding Center 4. Some fleets met heavy resistance. Some facilities had been moved or reinforced. But even the partial successes freed thousands of prisoners and destroyed critical Velthari infrastructure. When Admiral Park Jisoo gathered reports from all the assault teams, the numbers were clear. Humanity and its allies had rescued over 40,000 prisoners in a single night. They had destroyed a third of the consortium's shipbuilding capacity and crippled their communications network. The Velthari had been hurt. Badly. But what damaged them more than the military losses was the shock. For 12,000 years, no one had challenged them like this. No one had dared. They had believed themselves untouchable, invincible, eternal. Now they knew the truth. They could bleed. They could lose. They could be beaten. On the Horizon's bridge, Admiral Park Jisoo allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. But only a moment. The war was just beginning. The consortium would recover and strike back. The real fight was still ahead. A communication officer approached her. "Admiral, we have received a transmission from Velthar Prime. It is Ambassador Thessar Prime. Put it through." The ambassador's face appeared on screen. He looked different now. His confident smile was gone. His 4 hands trembled slightly. For the first time in his long life, he was afraid. "This is an act of war," he said. "You have made a terrible mistake. The consortium will destroy you. We will burn your worlds and enslave your species. You will regret this." Admiral Park Jisoo looked at him calmly. We already regret what we found on your ships and in your facilities. We regret that we did not act sooner. But we do not regret fighting for our children. And we will never stop until every single one of them is free. She cut the transmission and turned back to her crew. Set course for the next target. The night is not over yet. News traveled faster than light. Within hours of the first attacks, every species in the galaxy knew what had happened. The humans had done the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Velthari consortium and survived. On 1,000 worlds, people gathered around screens to watch the reports. Some were afraid. The consortium had ruled for so long that most could not imagine a galaxy without them. What would happen if the old order fell? What chaos would follow? But others felt something different. Something they had not felt in generations. Hope. The Galactic Assembly was the closest thing the galaxy had to a shared government. Representatives from hundreds of species met there to discuss trade, resolve disputes, and maintain the fragile peace between empires. The Velthari had always dominated these meetings. Their voice was the loudest, their threats the most serious. Now, for the first time in centuries, someone was challenging that dominance. Ambassador Thesser Prime entered the assembly hall with his usual confidence, but those who knew him could see cracks in his composure. His movements were stiff. His eyes darted around the room, looking for support that might not be there. I call for an emergency session, he declared. The humans have committed acts of war against the consortium. They have destroyed our property and stolen our inventory. The assembly must condemn this aggression and support our right to defend ourselves. The chamber was silent. No one spoke in his favor. No one seconded his motion. Thesser Prime looked around, confused. Did you not hear me? The humans have attacked us. They are criminals. They must be punished. From the human section of the hall, Diplomat Cha Sujin rose to her feet. She was small compared to most species in the room, but her voice filled the space with quiet authority. May I respond, honored assembly? The assembly chair, an ancient being from a neutral species, nodded. You may speak. Gene CHC. GZHC. GZHC. Cha Sujin walked to the center of the chamber. She carried a small device in her hand. When she activated it, holographic images appeared above the assembly floor. The images showed the inside of the breeding centers. They showed children in cells. They showed processing rooms and punishment chambers. They showed records of sales, with prices listed next to names and ages. This is what the ambassador calls property, Cha Sujin said. This is what he calls inventory. Children. Living, breathing children who were stolen from their families and sold like objects. She changed the images. Now the assembly saw recordings from the liberated facilities. They saw soldiers carrying children to safety. They saw doctors treating wounds that should never have existed. They saw faces that had forgotten how to smile beginning to remember. We did not come to conquer, Cha Sujin continued. We did not come for territory or resources or revenge. We came to rescue our children, and we found that our children were not alone. Millions of beings from dozens of species have been taken by the consortium over thousands of years. Bought and sold. Used and discarded. Forgotten by a galaxy that was too afraid to act. Thesser Prime stepped forward, his voice angry now. These are lies, propaganda. The humans are barbarians who do not understand our ways. Your ways? Cha Sujin turned to face him directly. Your ways include breeding sentient beings like animals. Your ways include torturing children until their spirits break. Your ways include treating entire species as resources to be harvested. She looked around the assembly hall, meeting the eyes of representatives from species that had suffered under consortium rule. The galaxy has known about this for centuries. Everyone knew, but no one did anything because they were afraid. because they believed the consortium was too powerful to challenge, because they thought their own safety was more important than the lives of stolen children. Her voice softened, but did not lose its strength. We are here to say that this is no longer acceptable. Earth will fight the consortium until every slave is free. We ask nothing from this assembly except that you stay out of our way. But if any species wishes to stand with us, to fight for something greater than fear, we welcome them. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, from the far side of the hall, the Kelith delegation stood. These were proud warriors who had been forced to serve as arena fighters for centuries. Their representative, a scarred veteran named Thrak, raised his fist in salute. Kelith stands with Earth. Next came the Morvathi. Old Chirves had traveled far to be here. His ancient voice was weak but clear. Morvathi stands with Earth. One by one, other delegations rose. Species that had suffered under consortium rule. Species that had lost children of their own. Species that were simply tired of living in fear. Within minutes, more than 40 delegations were standing. Thessar Prime watched with growing horror. His support was crumbling. His allies were abandoning him. "This is madness," he shouted. "You cannot defeat us. We have the largest fleet in the galaxy. We have weapons you cannot imagine. We will crush you all." Cha Sujin looked at him calmly. "Perhaps you will. Perhaps your weapons are too strong and your ships are too many. Perhaps we will lose. But at least we will have tried. At least we will have fought for something that matters. Can you say the same?" The assembly chair spoke. "Ambassador Thessar Prime, do you wish to continue this session?" Thessar Prime looked around the hall. The delegations standing against him represented a significant portion of galactic power. Not enough to match the consortium alone, but combined with the humans, combined with their strange determination and their impossible courage, they might just be enough. "This is not over," he said quietly. "You will all regret this day." He turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the standing delegations remained on their feet. Cha Sujin watched him go, then turned back to the assembly. "The consortium speaks of regret. Let me tell you what humanity regrets. We regret that we did not know about this sooner. We regret every day that children spent in those facilities, while the galaxy did nothing. We regret that it took us so long to find our courage." She paused, her voice softening. "But we do not regret this moment. We do not regret standing here, together, as free beings who refuse to accept evil. And whatever happens next, we will not regret fighting for our children." The assembly hall erupted in something that had not been heard there in centuries. Applause. Representatives from dozens of species clapped their hands, stamped their feet, made whatever sounds their bodies could make to show approval. On screens across the galaxy, people watched the scene unfold. They saw the mighty consortium humiliated. They saw a young species standing against ancient evil. They saw hope. On Earth, Secretary General Choi Minji watched the broadcast with tears in her eyes. She had hoped for support, but had not expected this much. The galaxy was waking up. The impossible was becoming possible. Her aide entered the room. "Ma'am, Fleet Command reports that 17 more species have offered ships and soldiers. Our alliance has tripled in size." Choi Minji nodded slowly. "Good. We are going to need every single one of them. The consortium will not accept this defeat quietly. They will come for us with everything they have. Are we ready?" She looked out her window at the night sky, filled with stars that had seemed so distant just a few months ago. Now those stars held allies, enemies, and children still waiting to be rescued. "We will have to be," she said. "We have no other choice." The war was not easy. It was not quick. And it was not without cost. For 6 months, the forces of Earth and its allies fought across 1,000 star systems. They won victories and suffered defeats. They liberated facilities and lost ships. Every day brought new hope and new grief. The Velthari consortium had been hurt by the first attacks, but they were far from broken. They had 12,000 years of accumulated power. They had weapons that could destroy moons. They had fleets that blackened the sky. And they had anger. For the first time in their long history, someone had challenged them and survived. Someone had taken their property and freed their slaves. Someone had made them look weak. This could not be allowed to stand. The colony of New Busan was a peaceful world. 3 million humans lived there, farming the land and fishing the seas. They had no military value. They were not a threat to anyone. The consortium destroyed them anyway. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. From orbit, Velthari ships rained fire on cities and fields. By the time they finished, nothing was left but ashes and silence. 3 million people, gone in a single night. The news reached Earth and its allies with the force of a physical blow. Admiral Park Ji-soo was in a strategy meeting when she heard. She had to excuse herself, walking to a private room where no one could see her tears. Secretary General Choi Min-ji addressed the people of Earth and beyond. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. The consortium has murdered 3 million innocent people. They did this not because they had to, but because they wanted to send a message. They want us to be afraid. They want us to surrender. Then, the flow. Then Resser. Then Resser. Then Resser. She paused, letting the silence hang. They do not understand us. They think grief makes us weak. They are wrong. Grief makes us remember why we fight. It makes us more determined, not less. We will mourn our dead. We will honor their memory. And then, we will finish what we started. Across the Alliance, people who had wavered found new resolve. People who had considered giving up remembered why they could not. Among them was a pilot named Seo Ji-yun. She had lived on New Busan with her husband and 2 children. She had been away on a supply run when the bombardment came. She returned to find nothing but rubble where her home had been. For 3 days, she did not speak. She did not eat. She sat in her ship and stared at nothing. Her commanding officer worried she would never recover. On the 4th day, she walked into the recruitment office for special operations. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was calm. I want the most dangerous missions you have. I want to be where the fighting is hardest. The officer hesitated. Pilot Seo, are you sure you are ready? You have experienced a terrible loss. Ji-yun looked at him. They think grief makes us weak. They do not understand us at all. She flew 47 combat missions over the following months. She never hesitated. She never held back. Her squadron called her the Ghost because she moved through enemy formations like she was already dead and had nothing left to fear. The tide of war began to turn slowly. Commander Im Hyun-woo developed a program to integrate former slaves into the Alliance military. These were people who had spent their lives serving the consortium. They knew Velthari tactics, Velthari technology, Velthari weaknesses. You want us to fight against our former masters? Asked a Kelith warrior who had spent decades in the arenas. We are not soldiers. We are property. Im Hyun-woo shook his head. You were property. Now you are free. And no one knows the enemy better than you. Help us. And we will help liberate everyone, still in chains. The former slaves proved invaluable. They knew which facilities were most important. They knew which officers were cruel and which were merely following orders. They knew the codes and protocols that made consortium systems work. With their help, the Alliance struck deeper into enemy territory. More facilities fell. More prisoners were freed. The consortium's grip on the galaxy weakened month by month. But the war's turning point came at the Battle of Velthar Prime. Admiral Park Ji-soo led the final offensive against the consortium homeworld. It was the largest fleet ever assembled by the Alliance. 400 warships from a dozen species, supported by thousands of smaller craft. The consortium defended their world with everything they had. The battle was brutal. Ships exploded. Soldiers died. The space around Velthar Prime filled with debris and fire. In the midst of the chaos, two engineers named Moon Ji-hye and Kang Tae-min realized they had a problem. A consortium superweapon, hidden on one of the planet's moons, was charging up. When it fired, it would destroy most of the Alliance fleet. Their ship was damaged. Their weapons were offline. They had only one option. If we ram the weapon at full speed, we might be able to destroy it, Kang Tae-min said. But we will not survive. Moon Ji-hye was quiet for a moment. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, 9 years old, and waiting for her mother to come home. Can we contact the fleet first? Let them know what we are doing? They managed to send one final transmission. Moon Ji-hye's voice was calm as she spoke. This is the survey ship Bright Star. We are moving to destroy the enemy superweapon. We will not be able to retreat. Tell my daughter I kept my promise. I said I would bring them all home. I am keeping that promise. The Bright Star accelerated toward the weapon. Consortium ships tried to stop them, but they were too slow. The little survey ship hit the superweapon at maximum speed. The explosion was visible from orbit around Velthar Prime. The superweapon was destroyed. The Alliance fleet was saved. Admiral Park Ji-soo watched the explosion from her command chair. Around her, officers wept silently. 2 people had given their lives to save thousands. All ships, continue the attack, she ordered, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. Make their sacrifice mean something. The battle raged for another 12 hours. When it finally ended, the consortium defense fleet was destroyed. Their orbital platforms were in ruins. Their homeworld lay open before the Alliance, but Admiral Park Ji-soo did not order an attack on the planet itself. She had come to free slaves, not to murder civilians. Instead, she sent a message to the Consortium High Council. Your fleet is gone. Your weapons are destroyed. You have 2 choices. Surrender unconditionally and release all remaining slaves, or watch as we take them by force, one facility at a time, until there is nothing left of your empire but ash and memory. The High Council argued among themselves for 6 hours. Some wanted to fight to the death. Others saw the reality of their situation. In the end, survival won over pride. The consortium surrendered. As the news spread across the galaxy, people who had lived in fear for generations wept with joy. The oldest and cruelest empire in known space had fallen. The impossible had happened. On the bridge of her ship, Admiral Park Ji-soo allowed herself one moment of rest. She thought about Moon Ji-hye and Kang Tae-min, about all the soldiers who had given their lives, about the children who had waited so long to be free. We did it, she said softly. We actually did it, but there was still work to be done. The war was over, but the healing had just begun. The Velthari Consortium surrendered unconditionally. Their leaders were taken into custody. Their facilities were opened. Their records were seized. For the first time in 12,000 years, the truth of their crimes was fully exposed. The numbers were staggering. Over the centuries, the consortium had enslaved more than 800 million sentient beings. They had destroyed entire civilizations. They had erased languages, cultures, and histories. The scale of their evil was almost too large to comprehend. Now it was time to heal. Liberation teams spread across former consortium space, opening every facility, every breeding center, every processing station. Admiral Park Ji-soo personally oversaw the operation, traveling from world to world to ensure that no one was left behind. Check every room, she ordered at each facility. Check every cell, every closet, every hidden space. If someone is alive, we bring them home. The work took months. Some facilities were well maintained, and the prisoners were in relatively good health. Others were nightmares of neglect and cruelty. Medical teams worked around the clock to save lives that had been abandoned. Over 2 million children were eventually recovered. Human, Morvathi, Kelith, and dozens of other species. Some were healthy enough to travel immediately. Others needed weeks of treatment before they could leave. A few would never fully recover from what had been done to them, but they were free. After years of darkness, they could finally see the light. The trial of the consortium leadership was broadcast across the galaxy. Admiral Park Jisoo served as one of the chief prosecutors, presenting evidence that had been collected from liberated facilities. Ambassador Thesser Prime, once so confident and proud, now sat in a prisoner's dock. His 4 hands were bound. His black eyes stared at the floor. He had aged decades in the months since his empire fell. The accused is charged with crimes against sentient beings, the court announced. Slavery, torture, murder, genocide. How does the accused plead? Thesser Prime raised his head slowly. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. We did what we have always done. We did what every empire in the galaxy has done at some point in its history. The only difference is that we did it longer and better than anyone else. Park Jisoo stepped forward. That is not a defense. That is a confession. The trial lasted 3 months. In the end, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The consortium leadership would spend the rest of their lives in prison, stripped of power and privilege, forced to watch as the galaxy they had dominated built something new. That something new began with the formation of the Galactic Compact. Representatives from every species that had fought against the consortium gathered to write a new law that would govern relations between worlds. The law was simple, 1 sentence, but it changed everything. No sentient being shall be the property of another. Secretary General Choi Minji of Earth was asked to sign the document first. She hesitated. This should not be signed by Earth alone, she said. This is not our victory. It is everyone's victory. Instead, representatives from all the allied species signed together. Humans and Morvathi, Kelith and Visari, dozens of others. They placed their marks on the same document at the same time as equals. The compact also established a new military force, the Liberation Fleet, dedicated to enforcing the new law. It would be composed of ships and soldiers from every member species. Its mission would be to ensure that no one ever built another empire on slavery. Earth was asked to lead the fleet. Choi Minji accepted, but only on the condition that command would rotate among species over time. Humanity did not want to become a new master. They wanted to be partners. On Earth, the rescued children finally came home. Some had families waiting for them. Parents who had searched for years, who had never given up hope, wept as they held their children again. These reunions were broadcast across the planet, reminding everyone why the war had been fought. But many children had no families to return to. Their parents had died waiting, or had been taken themselves, or had simply given up. For these children, new homes were found. Communities across Earth opened their doors. People who had lost their own children in the war adopted those who had lost their parents. Memorial gardens were planted on every continent. Trees and flowers marked the names of those who had died fighting for freedom. Moon Ji-hye and Kang Tae-min had a garden named after them, where their families could come to remember and to grieve. 1 year after the end of the war, Admiral Park Jisoo retired from active duty. She had given enough. She had lost enough. Now she wanted to do something different. She visited a school that had been built for recovered children. These were young ones who had spent their entire lives in consortium facilities. They had never known freedom. They had never known kindness. They were learning both for the first time. As she walked through the halls, children smiled and waved at her. Teachers greeted her with respect. Artwork covered the walls, bright colors and hopeful images, created by hands that had once known only labor. In one classroom, she found a girl she recognized. It was the same child from the cargo ship, the one who had asked about the farms. She was older now, healthier, with color in her cheeks and light in her eyes. The girl saw the Admiral and ran to her, holding up a piece of paper. "Look what I made." It was a drawing of a fleet of ships flying through space. Above them, in careful letters, the child had written, "Thank you for coming." Park Jisoo knelt down so she could look the girl in the eye. She remembered their first meeting, in the dark cargo hold, surrounded by stasis pods. She remembered the hollow look in those young eyes, the voice that asked if the rescuers were there to take them back to the farms. Now those eyes were bright with hope. That voice was full of joy. "Do you remember what I told you?" Park Jisoo asked softly. "When we first met?" The girl nodded seriously. "You said you would find every child. You said you would bring them all home." "That is right. And we did." The girl hugged her, drawing close to her chest. "Will you always come? If someone takes children again, will you always come to rescue them?" Park Jisoo smiled and pulled the child into a gentle hug. Around them, other children gathered, listening, waiting for her answer. "We will always come," she said. "That is what humans do. That is what all the free peoples of the galaxy do now. We protect each other. We protect our children. Always." The girl smiled, satisfied with this answer. She ran off to show her drawing to her friends, leaving the Admiral standing in the sunshine streaming through the windows. Park Jisoo watched the children play. She thought about everything that had happened. The discovery of the horror, the war, the sacrifices, the victory, the healing that was still ongoing. It had not been easy. It had not been painless. Many good people had died. Many wounds would take generations to fully heal. But they had done something that mattered. They had looked at an ancient evil and refused to accept it. They had fought against impossible odds and won. They had proven that courage and compassion could triumph over cruelty and greed. Above the school, above the planet, above the solar system, the stars burned with new meaning. They were no longer distant lights in an indifferent universe. They were homes. They were destinations. They were promises kept and hopes realized. The galaxy had changed. It had learned that even the smallest species could make a difference when they cared enough to try. It had learned that empires built on suffering would always fall. It had learned that the most powerful force in the universe was not weapons or wealth, but the fierce, unbreakable love of parents for their children. And somewhere in that vast galaxy, on worlds that had been dark for centuries, children were learning to laugh again. That was the greatest victory of all. The war was over. The new dawn had begun.